All right. So, how's everyone doing today? Pretty good, pretty good. It was pretty funny. You should thank Jessica Fry and my team because there wasn't actually going to be food. And then she goes, well, you know your article mentioned food, right? And so 2 days ago, I was like, well, I got to get some food together, hence the hodgepodge of meatballs, bruschetta, vegetables, and cheese. So if you see her, tell her thanks to be able to feed you a little bit today. So thanks for coming today. So what we're going to focus on a little bit is some information that was released a couple weeks ago in regard to etiquette and guidelines within the new building. One of the difficulties about talking about etiquette and guidelines and rules and stuff like that is that it can come off as very, very patronizing. I mean, it's very much like, it's just one of those difficult things where you kind of hope people understand what the main point of it is and why being a good neighbor is a good thing and stuff like that. And I'm kind of a firm believer that a lot of times when it comes to that, people aren't actively doing something pretty, I don't know, just something that would discourage you or get a different reaction that's on purpose. So I don't actively believe people do that on purpose. So we're going to put a little bit of a different spin on it. So what's pretty cool with today is we're going to sound pretty, I would say I'm going to talk about something kind of boring for about 5 minutes. And then we'll get into some fun kind of participatory stuff, which is one thing that'll be nice as a group we can talk about, but then also be recorded so when people do watch, it'll be available for them to learn different things as well. So the first thing that I just want to touch base on is how in the new administration building, etiquette isn't necessarily something that has to do with the real physical representation. It's actually about a behavior change. And the reason why I focus on that is what is the underlying factor of why someone is bothered by what someone else does, or if you're from a self-awareness perspective, if you have to change your behavior based on what the new building is going to do. So we've talked about it before, and it's kind of the biggest physical thing that people are going to notice at the new building. What is it? And it's actually going to be a little bit shorter than what we currently have. Yeah, the walls that are coming down. And so, and there's actually some neuroscience that talks about this, is the reason when people pick on each other, people complain about something, the first thing they go through is the easiest thing that they can pick out. So it tends to be relatively visual in that sense. And as a result, when you think about the new building, a lot of people start to think about, oh, the low walls. It's a real physical thing, it's a divider, and it's still a divider, but only for the lower half of your body now. So it's a little bit interesting that way. But I want you to answer just the question is the real issue with the low walls, or what's an issue that is actually the issue with the low walls for you? What's the behavior piece?
Lack of privacy.
What's that?
Lack of privacy.
Yeah, lack of privacy for sure. Anything else?
Noise.
Yep, noise. Noise is a great one as well. What else we got?
Talking.
Yeah.
Talking.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be noise. It might be just something where people are doing work. And so that's kind of the consideration that I want you to think about is when you have a situation within the new building, I want you to kind of ask first to yourself, what's the why piece of it? So continuous improvement does a 5 whys exercise, which has been around for years. And it's something that you can actually ask yourself. So if I ask, does anyone want to be I want to say pawn, my volunteer today for doing it? Anybody? Go ahead, Steve. And he's not a plan. I'm actually surprised he raised his hand for this. So Steve, so let's say you ask me and you say, you know what, Ryan, there's something with the new building. I just don't like the low walls. So we're going to play that piece, all right? So I'm asking you, why don't you like the low walls?
Because people be able to see right into my cube and everything that I'm doing.
So why does that bother you?
Because maybe people think that I'm not working when I am.
So why does that bother you?
Because I like to think of myself as a hardworking person.
Okay, so you see where you go down, and that actually becomes a behavioral issue if you're thinking something. So here's the piece that I would challenge you with that. From a self-awareness aspect, if they're looking in on your work, we'll say hypothetically, they're looking in on your work, and you're a good worker, why do you have to worry about them looking in on your work? So I'm not going to force anymore, but the idea is there's So my point is there's a brain switch that happens where you have to start to kind of actively think about these things. And one way you can do that is by continuously asking that same question over and over again to make it happen. So that was kind of the boring stuff. Are we kind of ready for the exciting stuff? Is it exciting? Yeah, it's pretty exciting. All right, so the reason why I mentioned that is because I want you to be cognizant of the behavioral change, not necessarily the physical things that are happening within the organization. If you get mad at the physical stuff, unfortunately that stuff's not changing. And actually for me, fortunately, it isn't changing because I think that's going to develop some ways that we can operate quite a bit better for it. So I want you to think about the behavior changes, and if you do want to think about approaching those and making changes. So first thing we're going to do though, we're going to meet this fine young gentleman.
Does he look familiar?
Named Melvin. So there's some things that are really funny. When I first saw this, and he doesn't know I'm going to say this, I thought this was Russ, just based on the build. And then Christy told me that it was me, and then I realized that I have one black suit coat I haven't worn in probably 10 years. So I get to pull it out. So if you notice that his arms are crossed, unfortunately this is tight and I can't get my arms all the way across. So it makes it a little bit tougher that way. But Melvin is an employee at Denver Water. He's as charming as Idris Elba. He's as handsome as Brad Pitt, and some compared to Jason Momoa, which I don't know if that's his last name, but my wife said he was really hot, so I was like, I'm going to put that one on there. Yeah, my wife said he was really hot. So just an employee that is just like the rest of us. I mean, I don't think there's a typical employee at Denver Water. I think we're all relatively unique, and I think that what makes us pretty special as humans. But one thing that we all do have in common, there are things we don't do right. There are things we do really well. And there's one thing that we should all be cognizant of is a self-awareness on how we actually do them. So Melvin is going to be an interesting character because you're going to see him a couple more times before we move into the new building and afterwards as well. He's kind of our etiquette spokesperson for a couple different things. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go through a couple different videos. I'm going to ask you questions about it. And this is really the learning opportunity for not only us in the room, but also the folks that will eventually be watching this on. So a couple tidying up things. It's going to sound strange. If you have an answer, I'm probably always going to repeat it just to make sure that we pick it up as well. And if you do have a question, we do have a mic here as well, so try to ask it quite loud as well. And we also have a hand mic. Sounds good? All right, let's do it. So let's meet Melvin.
Hold on. I'd like to meet you first. I don't know who you are.
Now that you don't realize how much that destroyed this video. No, I'm just kidding. First, what's your name?
My name's Steve.
Steve, how long have you been in Denver?
7 years.
7 years. I'm going to be honest, man, I have never seen you. That's crazy. So,
Why you don't know each other?
yeah. So I appreciate this. So my name is Ryan Price. I'm the manager of learning and organization development. In regard to this project, kind of a change management person by proxy. I think no one was here that would do it. And I raised my hand and got volunteered and was like, okay, we'll do it. But I've been at Denver Water for just about 4.5 years. There are some new faces. And what I primarily do is right now we're dealing a lot with leadership competencies in relation to the organization. Some of my team members are here that focus on the ADP project. We create internal learning and that kind of stuff as well. So that's our main focus. So feel free to talk to me. We're extension 7021. My email is ron.phelps who's a coworker, is one of my team members. So I appreciate that. So we're going to meet Melvin one more time. Get used to the song, by the way. So seems pretty normal, right? So let's start to see him in some situations that we may not have thought about, which you'll understand some of his behaviors. What we're going to do after each one of the videos is we're going to debrief a little bit. So I want you to kind of notice what you see within the videos are important. And then the second piece that I want to talk about is what ways do you think you can help improve this situation? Does that sound good? Cool. And I had a feeling this was going to happen. All right, so what we're going to do is we're trying to make this phrase, don't be a Melvin. Christy and I were going back and forth with the PowerPoint this morning, and there was a spelling error, and the response was don't be a Melvin. We tried to find a name that wasn't here. I also won't tell you who actually made the spelling mistake for it, but the don't be a Melvin was something that came out of that. So let's check this one out as far as being around your cubicle. So what did you notice in there? What did you notice were some of the things that were kind of in the way?
File cabinet.
Say that again, file cabinet? File cabinet, cool. What else we got?
Stacks of paper.
Stacks of paper. What else?
Trash can. Is that what it was? Kind of sitting in the aisle.
Could have been. Could have been a trash can. So what's kind of interesting about this video is there's two things that are at play here. One, you have some of the guidelines that are really, really important from a safety perspective, so the things that are in the way are things that aren't able to have just based on some of the safety things that we have to keep in mind. But the other piece that you saw was on top of the desk was a considerable amount of papers and things. Who tends to keep maybe what would be considered a non-discrete desk, maybe is the better way to say it. Who keeps theirs? Yeah, so I know some hands going up. So, and the reason why I point that out is there are some things that you want to make sure that you take into account with that. I'm not telling you got to put everything, completely even, that kind of stuff, but it's a behavior that you might have to think about. When it comes to the behaviors in regard to etiquette too, there's two ways to look at it. The first one is if you see someone else doing it, and then also to be cognizant of how you're doing it. And that's something that you'll eventually be able to notice when we get to the new building. So in regard to that, what other tips do you share, or what other tips could you share with me to keep your desk area clean? What are some things that you do that tend to work?
Put my stuff on your desk.
So put your stuff on someone else's desk. That's actually true. You could do that. I don't know if that's the best way, Ron. We're going to have that conversation after class. No, I'm just kidding. What else could you do? What other tips and tricks that you use to keep? What about you?
You can just clean up at the end of every day instead of
Clean up at the
every
end.
month.
Yeah, and that's true. John does that, and his desk is the nicest from 4 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. when you get in. After that, it's not very. No, I'm just kidding. That's pretty good. What else? What are some other things you do?
Maybe try to do more electronic.
Say that again?
Do more electronic.
Yeah, that's a great answer. You could do more electronic things. Anyone addicted to just files and files and files? A little bit of it. I appreciate this, Elvan. That's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah, there's some other things and that kind of meets a whole other needs versus just the tidy. What else? What else you got?
Like sometimes I'll clean my desk if I'm like at my desk a lot and I've been on the computer and emailing and I'm just like need like a mental break and I'm just like, oh, let me clean up for like a minute. Like I'm still working or whatever, I'm at work, but I'm just like, I don't know, for me, every once in a while I'll like decompress and I don't feel as like have anxiety if it is cluttery because
Yeah.
it just happens over time. So
Yeah, that's true.
it's not like scheduled, it just will happen. Sometimes I'm like, I'm gonna like clean my desk for 5 minutes because I want to take a break.
So kind of thinking of the break times, we're able to fill that and clean it. Cool. You mentioned you were going to say something, sorry?
File stuff with RDA or RNM.
Yeah. Wait, do you work in RDA?
No.
Because that's amazingly, generally only RDA people say that, so that's why I'm saying that's really good. No, what she was mentioning is, and congratulations for starting. What she had mentioned is file things with RDA and Iron Mountain and stuff like that where you can. I know you should be successing now as we move into the new building, and I got some old stuff in there. So if I do, I would assume other folks do as well. Anything else? I'll tell you what Melvin does. Melvin makes sure that he has an inbox and an outbox that is kind of only known to him. And so what I really do is I have a standing box that I use for the stuff that's kind of immediate. I try to organize, not necessarily my desk, but I organize the things on how I do work is another option that you can do. Certain files, what do you absolutely need versus not you need, so there are ways to do that. As far as the things on the floor, I just try to keep nothing on the ground, which isn't great. If you look at my desk now, I have some things I'm pretty excited to throw out, but within the new building, that is going to be a requirement that there can't be anything on the ground, particularly in the actual walkways for it, so keep that in mind too.
What, no shoes? We can't have an extra pair of shoes under our desk if we need them?
As long as they're not size 37, and they go farther. No, you can have an extra pair of shoes. It's just if it becomes to the point where it becomes a fire hazard, so it's a situation where they're, in the way, particularly not in the aisleways as well, for sure. What else we got? Anything else? All right, so let's move on a little bit. So now we're going to say don't be a Melvin, and we're going to watch as Melvin shows us how not taking care of public spaces can leave a sour taste with teammates. By the third time around, you won't be laughing at the end because you'll be sick and tired of that beat. So what other tips could you share with Melvin so he can keep common areas clean? And this one's going to be interesting because based on your floors, there's going to have to be some decision making on when you get into that. So what do you got? Who's worked in an environment where you have to keep areas clean? Hopefully everybody. This is one of those that should have been happening if it hasn't been since the beginning of time. So what do you got? Go ahead, Ellen.
Setting up cleaning schedules for like a refrigerator, just saying, maybe once every 10 weeks, as we walk in one area, you're responsible for cleaning out the refrigerator.
Yeah, that's pretty solid. So setting up schedules for cleaning, the suggestion was made for once every 10 weeks, depending on your team and department. For certain groups, it's going to be a little bit easier if you have so much of you within one area. But for those that have smaller groups all on the same floor, it might be worth kind of exploring that. What else you got? What else would make it easier? Go ahead, Pat. Pat without an
I said bring out a whipping stick.
So we'll actually touch on that at the end of this presentation. But yeah, don't hit anybody over this. That would be. What else we got?
Well, ideally, if everyone cleans up after themselves.
Oh my God. Are you serious?
Have to have like a team schedule.
Yeah. So I think that's the bare bones. That's the best way we can do it. Realistically, I don't know how often that's going to happen, but that's something that I think we should strive for, is just to clean up the stuff right after you do it. And so that's something to be pretty cognizant of. What else we got? What are some other things you can do? Go, Russ.
Make sure everybody understands how to use the 3-bin system that we have. So trash, recycle, composting.
Yeah. That's the nice part, is for everything that you would throw away, there's a right spot for it to go. And there's going to be plenty of points for you to do that, not just within the break room areas, but other open spaces that'll be able to have that too. Good, right?
And we're gonna have our own garbage can next to our desk.
So there's some specific language around that one. So no, you're not going to. The idea is that what you'll be able to do is use some of the time when you do toss some of your stuff out, that you can get up and walk, go fill your water bottle, that kind of stuff, and toss it out appropriately when you have it too. So that's going to be an interesting one, because not only is it in an open spaces piece, but it's also going to be at your desk when it comes to that piece.
So just to clarify on that, when we move, you won't be moving your trash bins with you. When you get over to the new place, Christy, correct me if I'm wrong, you'll be able to get a small container to put under your desk, but they'll be asking you to basically sign a pledge to say that you will empty your own bin every day in the appropriate 3-bin area.
And it's a request, right? You have to request the can?
Yes.
Yeah, you have to request the can as well.
There will be a process for that.
We will never share it with you, but no, I'm just kidding.
We'll communicate that to you.
What about eating at your desk? Because that's dealing with, cleaning up after yourself too. I mean.
So this goes back to the self-awareness piece I mentioned. There's a point where you have to be very cognizant of what you're doing. If you're eating something that does have a strong odor, I know fish is like the easiest one to choose. Let's say you're eating, I don't know, smoked salmon at your desk. There's two things that are going there. One, I would, because of my self-awareness of that, I would choose not to eat at my desk. I think you have to be very specific on how you do that. We're not going to say you can or cannot eat at your desk. I think that's the decision that you can make. I know there's some people that eat at their desk of the day. Probably why Steve and I just met each other, is I eat at my desk every day, so I've never seen him before with it. So it's something to be just cognizant of, and it's a decision that you'll have to make yourself. One thing we'll do at the end is we'll talk about how do you have a chat with someone if that is going on too. So we'll touch base on that. Cool. All right. Let's move on a little bit. So let's watch as Melvin shows us how making noise and not being aware of his surroundings can distract his coworkers. right. So what were some things that you noticed in there?
He stepped away from his station and talked.
Yeah, definitely stepped away from his station. Yeah. Has anyone taken a look? They were just released the other day, the amount of conference rooms that are within Outlook now. Almost, I think, twice as much as what was there before. I'm just kind of paraphrasing there. And those are only the reservable ones. So there's going to be a bunch of other rooms that you have in your area that aren't reservable. So there'll be tons of opportunities to do that. What else did you notice?
Put his headphones on, he was listening to music.
Yeah. Who uses headphones at your desk? So we all know to use headphones at our desk, right? The reason why I bring that up is when it comes to phone calls and stuff like that, people can just listen to their voicemails out loud. I recommend you try to keep that plugged in as often as you can, just for something that you can have there. The other thing too is there's some built-in building features that are going to be able to hopefully aim with this a little bit. Has anyone taken the tour yet, or has been on a tour over at the new building? Did you notice a long time ago? I'm not sure when you were back there, did you notice the small, they're kind of round holes that were kind of in the ground? So what's actually going to be happening is white noise is going to pop out of there. And what it's supposed to do is be able to cancel out some of that background noise that you're going to hear quite a bit. So there are some things that are built into that. Again, those are one of the things we'll have to figure out on adjustment for it, but you will see those. So what are some other things that you do at your desk that you can share with Melvin in order to help him be less loud? Yeah, which, yeah, I know, and so that's some of the stuff where you gotta be, just don't be a close talker, like don't be a quiet voice, but get really close to someone, because then you're starting to approach on someone else. But yeah, it's be very cognizant of the voice that you have. It's not a bad thing to have a loud voice, not a bad thing to have a quiet voice. It's just one of the things you want to use it appropriately at different times. I always use the analogy, if you're a soft talker and you're a coach, generally that doesn't work out in sports. There's some things for it, so you want to make sure that you use your voice appropriately for what you're talking about too. Anyone know if they're a loud talker on the phone? Loud talkers on the phone? Does anyone know how you can kind of stop yourself from loud talking on the phone? What's it? Yeah. So what you can do is you actually respond to someone who's talking quietly to you, and so you do have the opportunity on your phone to actually raise it a little bit in order to change your voice a little bit too. The other thing I've seen people do is when you are on a headset, take an ear off, because if you're talking, you're thinking of a headset on, so you need to talk longer. So that's just something else that you might be able to do. Cool. All right. Moving on a bit. So let's watch as Melvin shows us how having appliances at his desk can be unsafe. So this is one of those things I know some folks have brought up too. This is more of a rule change than it is an etiquette piece, but there are some key pieces here that I want to focus on as well. So what's funny about that one is our team had some difficulties trying to figure out what do you tell someone who's no longer allowed to have an appliance at their desk. So out of curiosity, what are other tips you could share with Melvin in order not to have appliances at his desk? Or what are some things he could do that a normal appliance what a normal appliance would do, but there's other ways to do it. What could you do?
The easy one is go to the break room for coffee, but I don't know if the other women in here will agree with me. It's always the battle of the winter office situation versus men that are generally warmer, and I've always struggled with that, so I have a sweater and a blanket at my spot.
Yeah.
Except that it's annoying that I have to have a sweater and a blanket and have finger gloves to keep warm in an office that's controlled.
Someone had mentioned last week, or maybe this week, they were in a meeting and someone brought a blanket in. Yeah. I think that's a great point. And so that's one of the basic ones, because at Denver Water, some folks do have space heaters or some type of heating blanket and stuff like that. Can't have those fire things now, so it is a major issue. But yeah, definitely dressing appropriately, making sure you have some extra clothes that you can wear. Hopefully, the new building will be heated and cooled at a bit more efficiently than it is in the current building. And that's one of the things worth why the upgrade for why the building was going to happen, but definitely having a sweater or something like that. What else can you do? Who's got an appliance at their desk?
There are USB options.
Correct. That's a great one.
Fans, I have a USB fan.
Yeah, that's a great option. So there are other options that you can do. It's part of the key is the plugs over usage, and then some of the fire hazards that can actually stem from that. So it's a great one, Lori. What else do we got? Any other ideas?
Could you explain to us why the load is an issue? I mean, what our goal is?
Well, it hits a couple different things. One is so when the building was actually built, there were a couple pillars that was kind of built on, and one of them was the safety piece of it. And so when the safety team came through and identified different things that were allowed and not allowed, that was one of the things that they didn't allow. So it was a decision based on safety review for that one. You're going to say something, Pam?
Why do you need a coffee maker at your desk? There's ones in the break room.
So I think that's what I would say. And I think actually that's a pretty good thing. Interestingly enough, most teams generally have a coffee maker, but it may not actually be at their desk. So just think of your break room as actually moving for it. That kind of goes back, did anyone notice some of the other additional things that were there that shouldn't have been in the office? Yeah. The 6-foot lamp, which I always think is funny. What's interesting about that is there are folks that have brought in their own personal furniture, and so they're not able to move it to the new building with it. But that was one of the things we learned when we went through this process, is that there are folks that have done things like that. What else did you notice? Excuse me? Yeah, so this is going to be a LEED certified building. And I believe platinum, is that the right level, Kate? LEED platinum. So, and there's certain things that are requirements for that. So for example, the lamp thing, oh no, that's well, pardon me. So with it, there's just certain amounts of power that we want to use, and it's based on a LEED certification that we need to and I believe we have to track it in specifically ways.
We'll be tracking it. The building is built to be net neutral. So the solar that will be on campus needs to offset the usage that's in that particular facility. So it was designed with an energy design, which meant per person in the building would only use a certain amount of electricity per day for their job responsibilities. So with that design in mind, we have to keep the things that are plugged in and trickling all day long to Denver Water operations.
Yeah, this is one where I think you'll realize what's interesting is when you do see the new cubicle areas, when you move into them, there's some things that are going to stand out, and if someone has something like a coffee pot at their desk, it's going to feel out of place as well. So that's something you'll notice too. Cool. All right. So let's watch as Melvin gets really frustrated with his coworkers who distract him. So this is one, we're going to spend a little bit more time on this one, because if you notice, the first ones are things that all related to something that Melvin was doing. This is one that actually focuses quite a bit more on what other people were doing. So you'll notice some of those things within the video as well. So what are some of the other tips you could share with me to deal with similar situations? Good, Mary.
Why didn't he put his headphones on?
Totally could have. I think that's something. I think there's an issue there, though, that I view it as there's two things. One, you can do that, but does that solve the issue? You know what I mean? So there's two ways, depending on what the conversation is or how prolonged it is. But headphones are definitely an option. I think that's great. What else we got? I got 20 minutes, y'all.
People don't like confrontation.
Yeah, yeah.
Surprisingly.
Yeah, confrontation's
But
hard.
I mean, I think option one, which is like, was that the first option, like to talk to them? That might be really difficult for a lot of people, probably most people. So you just kind of have to feel out, like, are you that person, or who are those people? Like, can you have a conversation with them in a professional manner? Otherwise, then yeah, it may be someone else being loud, but you're the one that has to move to the different workspace, where I'm sure people have a difficult time, like, well, why should I have to move? Like, they're the ones not following the etiquette guidelines. So that's definitely that's a tough one, but it's one that will happen a lot.
Yeah, the conversation piece is hard. I mean, it's really difficult to talk to your coworkers, you know. So that was supposed to be a joke. So your coworkers and stuff, and it's really funny because the confrontation piece that people run into, it can hit really hard in these situations for specific things. One, because what you're asking someone to do might be something that they really care about, or they might think you're stepping on their toes for it. But if there's a situation where, and this is a little bit more, this is a situation where you have to be a little bit more direct, is you got to have that conversation. If not, it's just going to continuously happen. I think there's some folks, and I think there's some supervisor focus where you're going to know you have some of those people, and moving into a new situation might be worth telling them ahead of time for it as well. The other thing that I've seen done really well in that situation, which doesn't necessarily lead to the confrontation, is you join them and then you say, hey guys, maybe we should be a little bit more quiet and dissipate a little bit. So there's other options where you can kind of insert yourself without necessarily hurting the feelings of the person that you're talking to. I also challenge a little bit, because if you're asking someone to be quiet, chances are the reaction's not going to be nearly as hostile as you're thinking it's going to be internally. So it's always worth trying to have those conversations for it too. Some other things when it comes to those type conversations as well is you want to keep a couple things in mind. First one, the politeness is the first thing. If you match their level of loudness with additional or higher, probably not the best way to start those conversations. One of the things that I always use that tends to work is I have a conversation that says, hey look, just to let you know, this isn't a conversation I normally have, so I just want to run it by you kind of stuff. So you can give it in a sense where it is a learning piece instead of something where you're just going to tell them to do something or not do something. So that's an option. Be very sensitive. If there's a group of 4 people and you know one of them, it's easier to talk to that one, so it's worth reaching out at a separate time. Generally, how you want to handle these things is immediately, depending on the situation. However, if it's better to do offline and say, hey guys, I'm glad you guys are working hard on whatever project, but I was able to overhear you. If you wouldn't mind just quieting down a little bit or moving to another area, that kind of stuff. The other thing is we look at physical things, such as the walls, as a hindrance, but there's also ways to look at them as a positive and use them for your own good, in the sense that, look, our walls are a little bit shorter. Because of that, sometimes the conversations carry a little bit. Do you mind if we have you go to another area? So it's just another way to do it. What else we got? Is anyone really worried about that?
No, but you know what? When people come to work sick, are you supposed to go over and say, hey, now that we don't have any walls?
So there is some funny things. I think the real message there is don't come to work sick. There's also don't tell someone they look sick. Tell them, are you sick? Is an interesting way. It might be a better way to ask them, Mary. With it, but I do think that's a valuable concern. Not only because of low walls, but just because our footprint is moving from wider areas into a smaller and taller area. So I think that's really valid. When it comes to that one, there's a couple different options if you're friendly with them, and it's almost tongue-in-cheek, like, oh man, you sound awful today, why don't you go home? If that's appropriate and that'll work for you, it's fine. But if there's someone you don't know, probably not something like that. But it's worth speaking to a leader as well, because that's something that they should be equipped to handle too. I've had leaders send people home as well.
I was just going to say on that issue, and a lot of these issues like noise that we're talking about today, they're happening here now. You just can't see them all the time. I can't see anything because I'm way shorter than the walls. But the extra 3 foot of wall that's next to your cube is not keeping the germs away from you. It's also not really keeping the noise away from you either. So it's really just we're gonna be able to see it more, but it's still shouldn't be happening here, and it shouldn't be happening there too.
And since I'm new and I came from an office where we had moved into an open space like this, which were corporate walls, and most people are taller than so we hadn't noticed it. But to use it as an opportunity in our team meetings, kind of open it up before we move in there and issues arise. Like this is the biggest issue that people have raised, being worried about seeing the noise as opposed to people think it's hidden because you can't see yourself standing in the hallway talking. But that issue, and then the other issue that people are really worried about that we're trying to be cognizant of is gathering and waiting for the conference room to open, and people gather outside for 10 minutes if the meeting is late, then they're standing outside the conference room talking, and sometimes there's cubicles. And it looks like the layout, there's a lot of cubicle banks right outside of conference room entrances in some cases. So we're trying to remind ourselves, like, we need to break that habit of loitering there and loiter down the hall in an open area.
Man, that's great. Admittedly, I hadn't even thought of that from a noise thing. How, and I can't remember, it sounded like this was happening in a previous organization.
Yeah.
How did you guys handle both of those situations?
Well, it all came up after we moved and we realized the issues. And so it was a little bit confrontational, and we didn't want to go over and say, you're super annoying by standing out there. So we did, and it was uncomfortable. So knowing that, and trying to talk to people about, thinking of these kinds of issues that might come up when we move into the space. So
That's a great feedback.
That's already happened before.
Yeah.
They come out of a conference room to take a cell phone, with their cell phone, and they try to take a call, and your desk is like right there, and they, feel like they should lean on your desk and talk. And,
That was one time, Mary. No, and I'm not putting that down. I'm saying that makes a lot of sense, and I think that's where you have to begin to have that conversation of it has to become a conversation versus letting it go, because if that happens over and over and over again, people are going to think it's okay. I meant to mention this that also. One of the things that some people do is real passive aggressive, like signs and stuff. Try not to do those. Please have a conversation. That's a lot easier and tends to have a bit more of an effect than people just passive aggressively upping each other, which can be funny but a little frustrating for everyone. So keep that in mind. Go ahead, Ellen.
One question, now with more of the common areas, would you consider signage if they're not, you don't know who's doing it?
I'm going to challenge you a little bit, Ellen. What would you prefer to do?
I prefer to find the person.
And hunt them down.
Well, not really, but it's just sometimes, they're late in the afternoon, or they're not refilling the coffee, or they're just leaving the sink a mess. Those are the kind of things that they're most likely to happen, but I'm trying to get your input on what's the best thing to do.
Yeah, I think you do have a fine line there. What's the most appropriate thing you can do? If it is something where you feel it's necessary to do, don't make sure it's very polite. I've seen some that you can't really tell, are they just telling a statement, or are they like yelling at me within the note? So there's kind of different variations that you want to be cognizant of. As far as if somebody's not there, or you don't know who it is, probably just a friendly reminder would be okay. One of the reasons why we actually have the Melvin character is the idea to understand that this isn't something that we want people to be angry about. We don't want there to be arguments about it. We want it to be understood. So it's just the idea of, this is a self-awareness piece, and this goes to the cell phone one too. I need to be aware of my surroundings, so I need to take better care of what I'm actually doing.
So would it be helpful to kind of brand it that way and say, don't be a Melvin, clean up after yourself?
So that's why we chose to find a name that there isn't any. I'm going to be really crabby if there's a new employee called Melvin in the next, over the next year. So if you're a hiring manager, no Melvins, all right? So you will actually see these will be released. Actually, one of the first ones is going to be tomorrow, which I really urge you to look into on the Conduit when it comes out. Focus on the OCR newsletter. It focuses on 6S'ing, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it's actually my favorite, because what happens is it's the idea that do I just leave all my stuff here if I don't want it, and how absolutely rude that is. So I urge you to watch it. It does have the same tune, so hopefully you don't fall asleep listening to this music and then wake up and watch it, but we'll look at that. Cool. Those are all great questions too. So Because of that, I do have Steve Snyder and Christy Delinko and John Barksdale are part of our team that helps with the communications and the change management piece on it. What questions do you have above and beyond in relation to etiquette, but above and beyond what we covered today? What do you got? This one you don't you can stay silent for. You don't have to ask any questions.
I've got a statement.
Yeah.
Question. So my understanding, one of the reasons we went with lower walls is so that we can get a lot more natural light in there. And that saves on energy too, because we're using natural light. So if you had high walls, it would block the light, and then you'd be in dark areas and things like that. So that, it kind of helps to know the why. That's one of the reasons why.
Cool. Yeah, and I hope the walls actually don't become bothersome for you, because you still have some sense of privacy in the sense that you're actually divided still. You know, there's certain situations where when people hear open concept, what they think is you're sitting at a new desk every day, or you're sitting at a table that just has computers on it. So you do still have a little bit of that. You're also afforded a lot more room as far as privacy goes. As mentioned before, if you look at some of those desks, or excuse me, some of the conference rooms, there's a lot of them that you can book. And then when you look at your maps, you realize there's a lot of them that are just easy for you to walk into. And to John's point about the light thing, that is one of the reasons why is the natural light, I believe, helps with LEED, but it also helps with well certification, which is really expensive, but we're still trying to meet some of the requirements for it. And some of that is being able to have natural light versus fluorescence and stuff like that. Also, I love being in this room for it, because if you notice, all the lights are on and there's about 12 different light bulbs that are being used just because they're all different. So there's some consistency is just another thing for it too. Go ahead, Steve.
And to pick up on what John was saying, I was just over there yesterday walking through and shooting another one of those weekly videos with Brian Good, and most of the interior is finished. Most of at least the desks and the cubes are in. And when you're walking on a floor, it's a really dramatic difference from what we have now, just in terms of feeling like it's an open, healthy, welcoming work environment. Like I said, there's a ton of daylight. You can see from one side of the building to the other in a lot of places. Just being able to look outside and see blue sky, or when storms are rolling in, you can see the traffic on I-25. It's a really different sort of thing, but there are also a lot of alternatives to work other places, not even just those phone rooms and smaller meeting rooms. The cafeteria is very open. There are places to sit there. There's an open area right outside the cafeteria where you can go work, where there will be seating. There's a number of break rooms and open areas on every floor. There really are a lot of opportunities to actually go around and explore the building. First and second level, the lobby's very open. It's a very different feeling, but it's a really cool feeling. And I think getting over the fact that we're not in this little maze of cubicle walls, once you get over there, I think you'll find it's pretty amazing.
Yes, but if you don't have a laptop, you're kind of stuck at your desk. You know, if you have a desktop, you can't be going out to a conference room.
Can you ask for a laptop? I'm asking, I'm not sure the rule. Are you able to ask for a laptop? Like, can you change out your desktop for a laptop?
I don't know.
I do believe that's an option for it, so that might be something worth looking into. But I understand the constraints there would make that very difficult. Bare minimum, if you can't get one, try to find a room that has AV in it. I mean, I know you're logging in that way, but that becomes a little difficult too.
Yeah, I just think that people have to be aware of that some people, they're going to walk into their desk.
But you also don't want to sit at your computer 8 hours a day.
No.
I mean, there are times that are built in for other things.
That's
and
good.
Like was mentioned before, we have this imaginary world where we live in 5 to 6 foot walls, and we think that gives us privacy and that we can talk and be loud and that no one can smell our food and that our germs aren't going to be transmitted around. But I'm surrounded, and I fail to notice it myself sometimes. The noise is still there. The smells are still there. Our walls right now, it's a little bit of an illusion. So losing a couple feet on the wall is really giving us the ability to be more aware of the noise we're making and the smells we're sharing and those kinds of things. I don't think it's going to be that big of a change, except for visually not having the walls there. But as far as the etiquette that we have, I think it's an opportunity to improve for our neighbors now, because I know my area is never quiet, and so I'm constantly wearing headphones. It would be nice if we all had lower walls and we could see that we were affecting each other. So that's how I think about it.
The last thing that we'd love to do is you'll notice there's a cutout of Melvin back there. We'd love to get your photos by there and enjoy who he is, just because this is part of our campaign from an etiquette standpoint. We'll also be here afterwards for a couple questions if you have, and realize this will be recorded. So, cool. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.